They say truckers see things no one else does, shadows standing too still at the edge of the road, eyes staring from the trees, voices on the CB that don't belong to anyone alive. Out here, with nothing but darkness in your mirrors and hundreds of miles ahead, something always rides with you. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's guilt, or maybe it's something you picked up without even stopping. Welcome to Dark Phantom Rides, where we bring you true horror from the loneliest highways on Earth. If you've ever looked in your side mirror and thought you saw something there only for it to be gone, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because the road gets darker from here. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming around the next bend. Let's move to our first story. They call it the Midnight Hailer out on Route 28, a long, winding highway that cuts through the densest forests in the upper Midwest. It's a route mostly used by long haulers with nothing but miles of blacktop and scattered truck stops every 100 miles. The story I'm about to tell came from a man named Curtis Dale, a career trucker with 30 years under his belt and no taste for ghost stories, until the night something climbed into his rig that wasn't supposed to. Curtis had picked up a last-minute job hauling automotive parts from Michigan to North Dakota, a route he knew well. He'd made that run over a dozen times without a hitch. But this time, his departure got delayed. He didn't leave until almost midnight, and by the time he hit the stretch of Route 28, known to locals as the Hollow, the fog was thick enough to eat headlights. Still, Curtis wasn't one to spook. He turned up the radio, lit a cigarette, and kept his eyes on the road. But as he passed mile marker 117, his CB crackled to life, only he hadn't turned it on. He hadn't used it in years. Breaker, breaker. Is anyone out there? A childlike voice whispered. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't distorted, just soft and strangely calm, like it came from right behind the seat. Curtis froze. The air in the cab felt instantly colder. He reached for the CB unit, confused, checking the knobs. The channel was set to 19, but no one had called in all night. He responded without thinking. Yeah, this is Curtis. You okay, kid? Nothing, just static. Then another voice, deeper this time, flat. He hears us now. Curtis felt the hairs on his neck stand up. He scanned the mirrors, checked the bunk behind him. Empty. He kept driving, chalking it up to exhaustion or interference. But as he rounded a bend, he saw something on the side of the road. Someone. A small figure, barely visible in the fog, waving a flashlight back and forth. Against his better judgment, Curtis slowed down. Could be a real kid after all. Could be someone hurt. He pulled over, put on his hazards, and opened the passenger door. You need a ride? He called. The figure stepped forward, a boy, maybe 10, barefoot, in a gray hoodie soaked with dew. No injuries, no scratches. Just a pale face and blank eyes. The boy didn't answer. He just climbed into the passenger seat, folded his hands in his lap, and stared straight ahead. Curtis tried to ask questions. Where are your parents? You okay? How'd you end up out here? But the boy wouldn't speak. Not a word, just stared. It didn't feel right. Curtis got back on the road and decided to drop the kid at the next town, but the longer they drove, the thicker the fog became. His GPS froze. Cell signal disappeared. Even the mile markers vanished. Curtis started feeling lightheaded, like time wasn't moving. He glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m. He blinked. Checked again. Still 3:17. They drove for another 20 minutes, but the clock didn't change. He started sweating. Even though the cab was ice cold, the boy finally spoke. "You shouldn't have answered." "Not on this stretch." His voice wasn't frightened. It was calm, matter of fact, like a warning. Curtis gripped the wheel. "What the hell are you talking about?" The boy pointed to the dashboard. The CB had turned itself back on. "You let them know you could hear. Now they want a ride too." And just like that, the interior lights flickered. The cab filled with a smell like rot, like something pulled from a bog. Curtis felt movement behind him, something shifting in the sleeper berth. He jerked the wheel, panicked, pulling over onto the shoulder. He turned to look and froze. The bunk wasn't empty anymore. There were hands, gray, stretched, inhuman, pressed up against the curtain from the inside, distorting the fabric like something was trying to push through. He jumped out of the cab and slammed the door, heart racing. The boy remained inside, unmoving, still staring ahead. Curtis circled the rig, grabbed his flashlight, and flung open the sleeper door from the outside. Nothing. Empty. He stormed back to the driver's side, but the passenger seat was empty now, too. No boy. No trace. Just a folded piece of paper. Resting on the dashboard. Curtis picked it up. It was old, water-damaged, but readable. It said, "If you hear them, don't stop. If you stop, don't answer. If you answer, don't look in the mirror." He stared at the note, shaking. Then he heard it, breathing, heavy, right behind his left ear. He turned reflexively and saw his own face in the mirror. But it wasn't his expression. The face was grinning. Mouth too wide, teeth too sharp. Then it blinked on its own. Curtis slammed the door and tore off down the road, hands shaking, trying not to look at the mirrors, trying not to hear the soft, childish voice coming through the CB again and again. "Breaker, breaker, Curtis. We're still riding with you." He made it to the next truck stop by dawn, completely disoriented, unaware of how much time had passed. When the gas station clerk asked if he was okay, Curtis just nodded and asked where they kept their mirrors. The clerk told him they didn't have any, said they'd all shattered the night before. Right after a rig came through with all its lights out, engine cold, but still moving. No driver inside. Just the smell of stagnant water trailing behind. Curtis quit trucking 2 weeks later. Sold the rig for scrap and never looked back. But even now, he keeps the folded paper in his wallet, just in case. Because every so often, when he walks past a quiet room with a mirror inside, he hears it again. "Breaker, breaker, Curtis. We're still riding with you." Let's move to our second story. They call it the Lot Lurker, and this one comes from a former driver named Eli Warren. A quiet, no-nonsense guy who did night hauls for over 2 decades before one night at a truck stop in Nebraska changed him forever. Eli was the kind of man who didn't believe in the supernatural, didn't spook easy, and sure as hell didn't tell stories just for attention. But the thing that happened to him in May of 2013 was something he only started talking about years later, after the nightmares refused to go away. It was around 2:40 a.m. when Eli pulled into a weather-beaten truck stop off I-80. You know, the kind flickering overhead lights. Just one old vending machine and a bathroom that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. He wasn't planning to stop long, just enough to use the restroom and check his logbook. The lot was nearly empty, save for 2 rigs parked way at the back and one beaten-up RV near the far corner. Engine cold, no signs of life inside. Eli stepped out of his truck and noticed right away that something felt off. The air smelled metallic, like rain, but the skies were clear. The hum of insects was gone. Total silence, except for the crunch of gravel under his boots. As he walked toward the restroom, he passed the RV. Its back door was slightly ajar, swaying just a bit in the breeze, but the strange thing was, it didn't look broken into. It looked peeled, like something had clawed it open from the inside. He paused, staring at the gouge marks, but ultimately kept walking. Not his business, not his problem. The restroom was as grimy as he expected, graffiti on the walls, flickering. Light bulbs, cracked mirror. He didn't stay long. But as he was washing his hands, he heard it footsteps. Not outside, inside, in the next stall. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Eli leaned to look under the stall door, but he didn't see boots. He saw bare feet, pale, long-toed, with dark stains trailing from the toes to the cracked tile floor. He cleared his throat. "Restroom's closed, man," he said. No answer, just breathing, deep and animal-like. He didn't wait around. Eli bolted from the restroom, heart pounding, but when he stepped outside, he froze. His truck, which he'd parked facing the building, was now turned completely around. Lights off, engine silent. There were long, dark handprints smeared across the hood. He looked back toward the RV, and the door was now wide open. Something was standing in the shadows just beyond the doorway, tall, thin, unmoving. He couldn't see its face. He didn't want to. He climbed back into his rig, locked the doors, and tried to start the engine. It coughed once, twice, then nothing. Dead. But the dash lights flickered on, and the radio came alive. Only he hadn't touched it. A voice whispered through the static, female, young, almost musical. "You're parked in my spot." He turned the radio off. Silence. Then, bang, something slammed against the passenger side door. He spun around, no one there, but the window was fogged up. From the inside, he wiped it clean with the back of his hand and saw it, a face, inches from his own, wide smile. Skin stretched tight like plastic wrap, empty eyes. He screamed and jumped out of the truck, leaving the door swinging behind him. He ran toward the fuel station building, but the doors were locked tight, lights off. Even though he'd just seen a cashier inside earlier. Eli turned around. Every truck in the lot had vanished. The RV was gone. His own truck now sat clean, engine running, no trace of what had just happened. No handprints, no fog, no face. He stood there, frozen, until a stranger tapped him on the shoulder. A man in a uniform, younger, with a badge that read Deputy Crane. The officer asked if he was okay, said he'd been circling the lot on patrol, and saw Eli standing there like a statue for over 10 minutes, not moving. Eli told him what he saw, but the officer just frowned. "That spot over there?" Crane said, pointing to the space where the RV had been. "Nobody parks there anymore." "Not after what happened back in '97. Eli asked what he meant. Deputy Crane explained. A girl named Lily had gone missing from that very RV after a late-night argument with her trucker father. They never found her body. The only thing they recovered was the RV torn apart from the inside. The father swore he saw her outside his rig weeks later, late at night, smiling at him from the shadows. He died in a collision on that same stretch of I-80, swerving to avoid what he said was her standing in the road. Since then, truckers had reported strange things in the lot faces and mirrors, cold hands reaching from bunks, radios that whispered names they hadn't spoken in years. But it always started the same way. Parking in her spot. Eli didn't even respond. He just walked back to his truck, engine running fine now, and drove off without looking back. He quit long-haul trucking 3 weeks later and never touched a CB radio again. But every once in a while, he checks his rear view at night, especially when he's near empty lots or quiet rest stops, and swears he can still hear that voice just beneath the static. "You're parked in my spot." And if he's ever unlucky enough to forget to stop for just a moment and rest his eyes, he knows he might wake up to fog on the window and that smiling face waiting just inches away, because some passengers don't need to open the door. They were already inside. Let's move to our third story. They called him Whispering Jack, a name whispered through the CB waves like a ghost rider's warning. This story comes from a driver named Cole Rayner, who spent over 15 years hauling goods across the American Southwest. Back in 2017, Cole was doing a solo night run through a remote stretch of Arizona desert between Winslow and Holbrook. This wasn't his first time on this route, but something about that night gnawed at his gut before he even turned the key. The weather had turned strange clear skies, but static buzzed through his radio. His headlights kept flickering even after maintenance, and for some reason, his truck's digital clock kept resetting to 3:33 a.m., no matter how many times he corrected it. He shrugged it off at first, thinking it was just electrical junk acting up. But by the time midnight rolled in, that desert felt less like land and more like a grave with no marker. Cole was driving for hours. Flat, open road, nothing but sand, scrub, and a sliver of moon to keep him company. Around 12:40 a.m., he passed a sign that read, "Devil's Spine to 5 miles ahead." He didn't remember ever seeing it before, even though he'd driven this route dozens of times. As he slowed slightly to examine it in his mirrors, his CB suddenly crackled to life. No call, no handle, just breathing. Slow, raspy, right in his ear like someone was hiding behind the seat. Then a low whisper, "Keep driving. Don't stop. No matter what." That alone would have made most men stop right there and turn around. But Cole, he was stubborn. He shook his head, turned the CB off completely, and kept on. A few miles later, he saw headlights up ahead. A truck pulled off on the side of the road, hazards blinking. As he got closer, he saw a man standing in front of it, waving him down. Cole slowed. Something felt off. The man's face was pale under the dome light, no expression. Just slow, rhythmic waving like clockwork. Cole noticed the guy wasn't blinking, not once. He rolled down his window just slightly and yelled out, "You all right?" The man didn't speak, just kept pointing behind him toward the truck. Cole turned off his brights and leaned out the window for a better look, and that's when he realized the parked truck had no wheels. No tires, just a frame sitting in the sand. It hadn't broken down. It had been sitting there for years, rusted clean through. That's when the man smiled, not friendly, not thankful, just wide. Too wide, unbroken, like his face had forgotten how to move normally. Cole jammed the gears and peeled off down the highway, checking his mirror, nothing there. But the whisper came back over the CB, even though it was turned off. Too late. You saw him. Static followed. Then silence. The road ahead twisted into Devil's Spine, an old mountain pass with a reputation for fatal wrecks. Steep drop-offs. No guardrails, sharp turns. GPS never recommends it, and most truckers avoid it, but Cole's nav said it was the only route left. Every detour was mysteriously grayed out. So he kept driving, nerves fraying with every mile. Then he noticed something terrifying. The road kept looping. He saw the same mile marker 3 times, the same roadkill, the same snapped tree leaning over the cliff. He even passed the same rusted-out red Mustang, its driver slumped over the wheel, unmoving. On the 3rd pass, Cole pulled over, heart racing. He checked his GPS, still said he was headed east, but the sun was rising to his left. That wasn't east. Then the whispers returned, not through the CB this time, but through his own phone, which had no service. Just voice after voice, overlapping. He's behind you now. He rides with you? Cole didn't dare look in the mirror, but he could see the shape in the glass reflection. A figure seated in the sleeper bunk, still hunched forward, wearing an old trucker cap low over its face. He reached back, nothing there, but the reflection remained. He made a decision, then turned back. Hit reverse, even if the GPS fought him. But as soon as he shifted gear, the truck went dead. No lights, no ignition, just cold silence, and then tapping on the side window. Tap, tap, tap. He turned slowly and saw his own reflection. Except it wasn't mimicking him, it was smiling, not his smile. Wider, broken, its mouth opened and whispered in his voice, "You're not going anywhere." Cole blacked out. When he came to, his truck was parked neatly at a rest area just outside. Holbrook, early morning. Blue sky, birds, people, like nothing had happened. But the CB was still on, still whispering static. His phone still showed 3:33 a.m., and worst of all, there was a handprint, black and greasy, on the inside of his windshield. It didn't match his. Long fingers, almost skeletal. He never used that route again, never drove at night again. Sold the rig and got a job at a warehouse, swore off open roads for good, but some nights, especially near 333, Cole says he hears the voice again, in his dreams, in his garage, whispering warnings too late to matter. They say Whispering Jack is a lost soul, a trucker who wrecked in Devil's Spine decades ago and now rides with those who don't listen, who ignore the signs and help the wrong people. They say once you've heard his voice, you never ride alone again. You carry him like a ghost in your rear view, silent, until he chooses to speak again, and when he does, it's always too late. Let's move to our fourth story. They say if you drive long enough, the road starts remembering you. Some truckers say it's the road that keeps them company. Others believe it watches. But for Vincent Vinny Hawley, a seasoned long hauler with 20 years behind the wheel, the road didn't just remember him, it hunted him. This all started in late fall of 2019, deep in the upper Midwest. Vinny had just taken a run up through Michigan's Upper Peninsula, heading toward a small timber drop near Copper Harbor. The route was narrow, winding, and notoriously remote, miles of forest in every direction. No rest stops and barely any cell signal. His dispatch had warned him weather was moving in fast. Snow, ice, but Vinny had a reputation he never missed. A delivery. He'd seen it all. Until that night, around 6 p.m., the first flakes hit. By 7, the road was gone under a blanket of white, and by 8, even high beams were useless. He slowed to a crawl, hands tight on the wheel. CB radio crackling with distant voices that didn't sound quite human, half static, half ... humming. At first, he blamed the storm, but the voice that came through next, that was no trucker. It was a child's voice, small, distant, repeating over and over, "Are you still there? I'm cold. I want to go home." Then silence. Vinny stopped the truck. The sound was coming from the trees. Now, a seasoned driver doesn't walk off into a snow-covered forest at night. But there was something about the voice. It felt familiar, like someone he'd once known, like someone he'd lost. Against better judgment, he opened the door and stepped out. Snow swirled like ash. The trees stood unnaturally still. That voice returned closer now. "Please, I'm right here." He followed it just a few feet into the woods when he saw them small footprints, barefoot in the snow, leading nowhere, just appearing, then vanishing. He turned back toward the truck, only to find it was gone. Not just moved, gone. No tire marks, no lights, no road, just white. The woods had closed around him like a throat. He called out, panicked, and the voice came again, but now it was wrong, hollow, like an echo inside a metal drum. "I want to go home," it said again, but distorted, slurred, like it was mocking him. He ran, slipped, fell, got up, kept running, no direction, just away. Then suddenly headlights. He stumbled into the road as a truck blasted past, horn blaring. Not his truck, but a newer model. The driver inside looked straight at him but didn't stop. Vinny screamed, waved, nothing. Another truck followed. Then another. None acknowledged him, none even slowed. It was like they couldn't see him. He walked for hours. Then he saw it, his own rig, parked neatly on the shoulder, hazards blinking. He rushed to it, yanked the door open, climbed inside, and froze. The cab smelled different, musty, like wet clothes and mold. The seat was warm, but he hadn't been in it. The dashboard showed the clock, 3:33 a.m., a theme, it seemed. But what really chilled him was the paper on the passenger seat. It was a delivery receipt with his signature. Dated 2 days later. Vinny blinked, checked his phone. Dead. No signal, no battery. He turned the engine, It started instantly. The radio flared to life with static and then a voice. His voice, saying, "I found you." He drove, didn't stop until daylight, didn't speak of it to dispatch, didn't tell his wife, just kept driving. But things got worse. In the months that followed, he'd find items in his cab he didn't remember buying, food wrappers from meals he never ate, logs in his trip book from deliveries he never made. Sometimes he'd hear himself on the radio, saying things he wasn't saying. And always, at 3:33 a.m., something would change. The road would go quiet, the mirrors would frost, and he'd hear that voice, "Are you still there? I want to go home." Eventually, he installed a dash cam, left it running overnight while parked at a rest stop in Wisconsin. When he reviewed the footage the next morning, he saw himself get up at exactly 3:33 a.m., open the truck door, walk into the woods, and vanish while the real him was still asleep in the bunk. The footage cut off after 1 minute. When he checked again, the cam was gone. Only a strip of duct tape left where it had been mounted. Vinny doesn't drive anymore. He quit in 2021 after his truck was found running in idle in northern Minnesota. He wasn't in it. He was found 3 days later, wandering a back road in thermal socks, no shoes, eyes swollen shut. He doesn't remember what happened. Or maybe he does, and he refuses to speak of it. His wife says he often wakes up at 3:33 a.m., staring at the wall, whispering, "I'm cold. I want to go home." They say the northern roads hide more than wolves and storms, that there's something ancient out there, something lonely. It calls to those who are already halfway gone, the ones with empty logs and restless sleep. And if you hear it, if you ever hear a child's voice over your CB radio on a snow-covered road, don't answer, don't stop, keep driving. Or, the road might remember you too. And once it does, it never lets go. Let's move to our fifth story. They say some deliveries are cursed from the start. That was the case for a Louisiana flatbed hauler named Curtis Ray Hooks, who'd been hauling steel beams, lumber, and prefab homes across the Southeast for over 15 years. He wasn't the jumpy type. He'd driven through hurricanes, wildfires, and seen his fair share of roadside tragedies, but nothing ever truly followed him. That changed in 2016, when he picked up an unusual load from an old church demolition site just south of Baton Rouge. The dispatcher had sounded strange on the call, too urgent, almost like he was trying to get rid of the job. "Just take the cargo north," he'd said. "Don't open the tarp. Don't stop near any cemeteries. And whatever you do, don't listen if you hear knocking." Curtis had laughed it off. It was just old timber, supposedly salvaged from a 200-year-old chapel, built on swampy land. He figured the knocking bit was a joke. It wasn't. From the minute he pulled out of the lot, things felt wrong. His truck ran hot despite the cool air. The steering felt heavier. Even the road seemed to stretch unnaturally ahead of him. But he brushed it off as fatigue. Until the first night. He was parked in a rest area off I-55, deep in Mississippi, when he heard it, 3 distinct knocks. Not from outside. From inside the trailer. He froze, heart pounding. The cargo was supposed to be wood, nothing living. No animals, no people, nothing that should knock. He stepped out, shined a flashlight around the rig. Nothing. No damage, no movement. Then came the whispering dot. It wasn't words at first, just soft, dry breath sounds, like someone whispering through the wood. As the night deepened, the whispering formed patterns, names, verses, warnings, blood on the beams. Blood on the beams, it repeated. He tried turning on the radio, the CB, anything to drown it out, but all he got was distorted hymns, twisted and backward, as if some ghost choir was playing on loop. The temperature dropped inside his cab, despite the heater blasting. And when he looked in his side mirror, he swore he saw figures walking alongside his trailer, tall, pale, dressed in what looked like antique preacher's garb, their faces blank, eyes burning black. He didn't sleep, just drove for hours, through the fog, through his own rising fear. The second night, he tried parking in a different spot, avoiding any place near a graveyard or chapel. But the knocking came again, louder, faster. This time something began, pressing against the inside of the tarp, stretching it, clawing, like something underneath the pile of wood was trying to crawl out. He floored it, woke the whole rest area with his horn, and didn't stop until he crossed the Alabama border. He called dispatch. No answer. The number just rang, or when it picked up, all he heard was faint organ music. The third day, he made a decision: finish the delivery, get rid of the load, and never speak of it again. The drop site was a construction lot in Chattanooga, but when he pulled in, it was empty. No foreman, no crew. Just orange cones and a single trailer. He waited 2 hours. No one came. When he finally tried calling again, a man answered. Old voice, dry, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. You're late, the voice rasped. Now the ground's too cold. You have to keep driving. Curtis hung up. That's when he noticed the tarp had come untied on one corner. The boards underneath were black, not stained rotted, but with strange carvings on them like they were etched with nails or knives, symbols he didn't understand. Some that looked like eyes, others like mouths, and in the gaps between boards, something moved. He retied the tarp, hands shaking, and climbed back into the cab, but he wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a man, at least what used to be a man. Face long gone to rot, skin like melted wax, but dressed in full preacher's robes. He turned slowly and said in a voice that chilled Curtis's blood, You're driving a church's grave. And they want to be remembered. Curtis lost time after that, hours, maybe a day. When he came to, his truck was parked on a dirt road. In northern Georgia, trailer door hanging open, boards scattered in the woods like fallen bones. He checked the dash cam. It had been ripped out. His arms were covered in scratches, some fresh, others old. His logbook showed false entries, places he never remembered stopping. The worst part? Etched into the dashboard in jagged lines were the words, "Thank you for the ride." Curtis left trucking 2 weeks later, told everyone he was burned out, moved to Arizona, quiet life, but the dreams never stopped. He dreams of wooden churches rising from swamp water, of faceless congregations humming sermons in reverse, of knocking always knocking. And when he tries to play music in his home, sometimes the speakers switch to old gospel hymns he doesn't recognize. One night, he woke to find muddy footprints on the floor leading to his bedroom door, and carved into the wood above it, that same message, "Thank you for the ride." 2. This day, no one knows what church those beams came from. The demolition company went out of business the month after. The dispatcher vanished without a trace. And the site in Chattanooga never registered in any city records. Just a patch of forest now, overgrown with weeds. And whispers. So if you ever haul a load that smells like dirt and memory, if you hear a knock when no one should be there, keep driving. Don't look back. Don't untie the tarp. And if a preacher ever thanks you for the ride, know this: you're already preaching their sermon, whether you like it or not.